Come be a part of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics with your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. Hear the voices of liberty speaking all across America. Doc Holliday provides thought-provoking interviews and commentary about the issues and actions that are afflicting this country and what we need to do to get America back on track. Get fired up, get inspired, get on board with Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right now.
And here we go.
Hey, once again, it's the sound of rock cracking, and you've got Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net. That's webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday, and we're glad to have you new listeners. I know coming from around different places, even around the world. We've gotten some comments, so we are glad to have listeners all over the world. This is a very important show this week because we're talking about socialism is dying in South America. Venezuela is on the ropes as far as socialism, but it's a very important note for us to see. And President Trump talked about that last week in Miami. Did you hear about it? Well, the mainstream media didn't cover it, so if you listen to CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, all these different stations, I don't think they said much about it at all, and they try to sequester the news. Why? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, and we're going to be talking about socialism. It's dying in South America. Is it rising in North America, especially the United States of America? Because we got the socialist, calls himself Socialist Democrat, is Bernie Sanders jumped into the presidential race. So we got a lot to talk about socialism. Before we do that, let me just remind you, last month was Black History Month in the United States. And did you see that clip of President Trump speaking to a roaring crowd in the White House full of African Americans who were yelling, Trump, Trump, Trump? You didn't hear that on the mainstream media? Well, that's why we're going to cover it here today on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Let me kick it off. Let me just let you hear what the mainstream media wants to keep quiet. There are some African Americans who really like President Trump and the First Lady, Melania, and even Vice President Mike Pence, who, if you remember just last week, a possible Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden, former vice president, said, well, he was a decent guy. Well, he's the vice president who followed Joe Biden. But guess what? Joe Biden got in trouble for calling Mike Pence a decent guy. Where is politics going? Well, that's a lot we can talk about. But let me play this clip because I know if you listen to mainstream media, you sure didn't hear anything about this, that there's a lot of black supporters for Donald Trump. Let's listen to this little introduction here at the White House just a few days ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Trump.
Thank you very much. Wow, what a good group this is. This is the future. This is the future. True. That's true. The First Lady and I are thrilled to host so many friends and pastors and government leaders, and our stage is being filled up with a bunch of winners like you, because I know you for a long time, Bob. And I want to thank you very much. Special guy, special friend for a long time. To be at the White House to celebrate African American History Month. Big month. Do you like the White House, right? This is the place, right? You know that. We're also grateful to be joined by our wonderful Vice President and Second Lady, Mike and Karen Pence. Hi, Mike. Hi, Karen. Mike, come on over here. Come on over here. Get up here, Mike. Come on, Karen. What a job they do. Today we are here to honor the extraordinary contributions of African Americans to every aspect of American life, history, and culture. From the earliest days of this nation, African American leaders, pioneers, and visionaries have uplifted and inspired our country in art, in science, literature, law, film, politics, business, and every arena of national life. The depth and glory of these contributions are beyond measure. You know it, I know it, and everybody knows it. We especially pay tribute to the African American heroes who have sacrificed in the name of freedom, equality, and dignity for all Americans.
Well, that was President Trump a few days ago celebrating African American History Month, Black History Month, right in the White House. And you know why you didn't see that on mainstream media outlets? Because they have spent the last 2 years trying to convince America that Donald Trump is a racist. And they are trying their best. If he's a racist, why would he have a celebration of African American History Month with a room full of African Americans going Trump, Trump, Trump? Are they brainwashed? Or is America just getting a delusionary conglomeration of visions from the mainstream media that are they're making and not showing the truth? Well, obviously, there's a lot of African Americans that do like Donald Trump, or he would not have the support that he got at the White House. So that's something that you're hearing on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, because you're not hearing it in mainstream media. And Fox News, thank goodness, will cover a few events and let people know about this, but very few other news outlets will cover it. And it is newsworthy. And not only the African American event at the White House, but guess what? We told you about the theme that socialism is dying in South America, but those are not my words. Those are the words from Donald Trump. And we're going to play a clip from Donald Trump in just a couple minutes that will explain what his thought is and why he's saying that. But let me just set it up, because you know down in Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro, who took over from Chavez, who was there before he died, and he blamed the United States for giving him cancer. But after he died, his hand-picked Maduro took place, and socialism has left a framework of a beautiful, rich country with vast amounts of oil, more than any other country in South America. It's just unreal what they have, and they have squandered that. And now they have people starving. Millions of Venezuelans have fled the country, going into Colombia and other places because they're starving. And even Jorge Ramos, who's no fan of Donald Trump, went down there and was showing people eating out of the garbage truck, and they detained him. They didn't want that image to get out. They didn't want him interviewing people who are really hurting and starving and eating out of garbage trucks. But that's the Venezuela today. That is socialism on steroids, and they've got people in Cuba and Russia propping up Venezuela. It's causing some international crisis because if you haven't been listening to the news, and a lot of this is not covered because it is the dying of socialism, but the National Assemblyman leader, Juan Guaido, he has declared himself acting head of Venezuela until they can get new elections. Maduro is still in control of the military. And just for you to know, Venezuela has more generals in their military than all the rest of the countries in the entire world put together. Did you hear what I just said? Maduro, the socialist, leader of Venezuela has, I think they said, something like 30,000 generals. So you get made a general, so you'll stay on, so you get bribes and kickbacks, and that's how he's keeping the military close to him, even though the people are against him, and they've come out by the millions to protest him. And hopefully, let's pray for a peaceful ending. Maduro needs to go, and the sooner the better. And Donald Trump really was kicking this off to an enthusiastic crowd in Miami made up of Venezuelan Americans and some Cuban Americans and people who have experienced socialism firsthand from their countries they lived in before they became Americans. So let's listen to what Donald Trump had to say in Miami again just a few days ago.
Hello, Miami. I am thrilled to be back in the state I love with so many proud, freedom-loving patriots. We're here to proclaim a new day is coming in Latin America. It's coming. In Venezuela and across the Western Hemisphere, socialism is dying, and liberty, prosperity, and democracy are being reborn. Today, our hearts are filled with hope because of the determination of millions of everyday Venezuelans, the patriotism of the Venezuelan National Assembly, and the incredible courage of interim President Juan Guaido.
Wow, a very noteworthy speech that, again, the mainstream media didn't bring. Did you hear the enthusiasm of this Hispanic audience in Miami? Do you know how important Miami is? Do you know how important Florida is for President Trump's chances at re-election? Do you see what President Trump is doing? Reaching out, we told you before, the African American community, but the Hispanic community plays such a large role in the electorate around the country, but especially in Florida. And Donald Trump is keeping his numbers up, and it's driving the liberals crazy. He's keeping his numbers up in the Hispanic vote, the Latino vote. And one of the reasons is why he's doing things like he is in Venezuela, trying to get rid of this notorious dictator socialist Maduro. And so far, we haven't seen violence from military. We have seen military cause death of Venezuelans, not in big numbers yet, but some of the border conflicts. So as we prepared this radio show, there has not been large amounts of violence. That could change. We hope not. We pray not. We hope Maduro will go to Russia, go where they'll give you a place to stay. And that's what makes this conflict so enticing for those in foreign policy, because China and Russia are wrapped up in Venezuela, the communist country of China, and the former communist anarchy, or what do you want to call the Death Star of communism, but it imploded. But now they still have the tendencies to work with the countries they did before, and they love the socialist Chavez and then Maduro, and so they've been courting the military. The Russian military has laid groundwork and working with the Maduro government, and so that's what entices and brings ratchets up the degree of importance and what's going on, and how do you make a transfer of power without violence. And then again, it goes back to the Monroe Doctrine. Who knows about the Monroe Doctrine? If you went to school the last 30 years, you probably don't have a clue. I hope you do. But that was President Monroe pretty much telling European powers to keep out of South and Central America. So there's a lot of thumbing in the nose by Putin and the Russians, and you see Donald Trump standing up. Now, if Trump and Putin were in collusion, do you think they would be having this separation of how to deal with Venezuela. But I do want to tell you, socialism is dying in South America, and the poster child is Maduro. And one of the things we need to understand about socialism is it never works. And it was Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, who said, I'll paraphrase it, but she basically said, socialism works till you run out of other people's money. And that's what basically happens with socialism. You promise, you promise, and you promise. You take money and everything away from others and give it, and there's no fairness to it, and it leads to widespread graft, division, and they don't have the medicines they need in the country. They don't have food on the shelves. Socialism doesn't work. We've seen it time after time, and we're going to get into some of those reasons and what it means for America on the second half of the show. But right now, let me remind you, listen to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You're listening to us right here on webtalkradio.net. That's webtalkradio.net. In just a moment, we're going to play another little clip from President Trump when he's speaking to that large crowd of Hispanics in Miami, Florida, and talking about the crisis in Venezuela. Before we get to that, let me remind you, there is a book called Bedrock Truth, and it's written by Doc Holliday, Dr. Alveda King, and she's the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we just celebrated Black History Month, but she has some great insights in pro-life and civil rights of the unborn in this book, which is called Bedrock Truth. Also, Dr. Alex McFarland has written some chapters in it. So it's a good book to have on your bookshelf, good book to read, to know the bedrock truths of this country. So if you don't have that book, you can go to my website. You can go right there to picture the book on the front page of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Order that book. We'll be glad to get that out to you. Now, let me remind you that, the listening audience, we had the midterm elections just a few months ago. Democrats are in charge, and now what we have is socialism creeping up, seeping up from the swamp. And there's people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the new congresswoman from New York. She is so proud of her new fame and so proud of being a socialist that when Amazon was going to spend billions of dollars and make New York one of its headquarters, she rose up and said, we don't want $150,000 jobs disrupting our communities. 25,000 jobs went down the tube because this socialist said, no, we don't want Amazon here. Well, just like people in Mississippi, this is where we do Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. People would love to have $150,000 jobs disrupting the communities throughout Mississippi. So if you're listening to us, Jeff Bezos, even though I don't like all your politics, I have to admit you got some great business ideas. And if you don't think Mississippi has the infrastructure, bring a little of your money down here, help build up infrastructure. They're like China. China will go out and stick a stake in the middle of a pasture, and then on this place we're going to build a city. And a few years later, the city is built, and people are coming in from the country, and they start from scratch. So, Jeff Bezos, come to Mississippi. We'll find you some land. You can build your headquarters however you want it, and build this infrastructure of your own money. And by golly, we'll love you down here. Come on down to Mississippi, Amazon. And I imagine there's people all over the country saying those things. Even the governor of New York is saying, come back and look at New York. Not everybody's like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but she does have a new comic book. She's the superhero for some leftists, and they got a new comic book. But as we talk about socialism on the rise in America, because what they're doing is they're putting the Democratic Party to a test, and they are hopping mad as far as anybody that tries to work with the Republicans, some of the moderate Democrats. And they, when I say they, I'm talking about the left-wingers, they tore Joe Biden apart when he said that Mike Pence was a decent man. And that's what our politics have gotten to, where you can't, if you believe in something, stand up and speak out. This left wing, we've talked about it before, they don't even want to hear it. They don't think you have the right to say it if it's something they don't believe. We have got to have free speech. We have got to have communication and a place to speak out our differences of opinion and seek out what's best. But we've talked about it on this show before. There's those in the socialist side who don't want to hear anybody's ideas because they believe they have the only ideas that are correct and nobody else should speak. And that is not American. It is socialist, leaning to communism. They want to shut people down. It's not right. Communism has failed. Socialism is failing, especially in Venezuela. And we don't have a need for it in the United States of America. The American people, I am talking about the millennials, including the millennials, wake up, smell the coffee, and run from socialism. Run as hard as you can. Run right in the arms of Donald Trump if you have to, or run into the right side of the Republican Party, or run into the moderate Democrats, run to the old-time conservative Democrats, but run away from socialism because it is a disease that will come back and not only hurt you, it'll hurt the entire country called the United States of America. Hey, that's Doc Holliday's take on it. Didn't mean to go that long because I wanted to play this clip from, again, a little clip of President Trump when he's speaking in Miami. Take a listen here.
The people of Venezuela are standing for freedom and democracy, and the United States of America is standing right by their side.
See, Donald Trump is reaching out to the Hispanic Latino community in ways that the mainstream media doesn't realize. I think some of them, a handful of them, do realize how he's reaching out, but they don't want anybody to have any hint that there are some Hispanics who like Donald Trump. And it's remarkable because the more they suppress Donald Trump, I think there's a natural instinct. Listen to this because you're not going to hear it anywhere else but right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. As the media suppresses the support of Donald Trump from the Hispanic and African American community, where he has pockets of support that seem to be growing with economic conditions and standing up against dictators like Maduro, I believe the more suppression the press has, there's this innate ability of President Trump to dwell on that, to springboard from that, and he's making more headway than anybody understands. And he understands he needs to win Florida to win re-election. He loves Florida. He got his victory in 2016, which surprised many in the Hillary campaign because they just knew they had registered more Latinos and more had come in. And now since Puerto Rico and the hurricane, where a lot of people came to Florida, and they just thought they had the governorship won, but Ron DeSantis won, the Republican won just barely, but he ran against a socialist and won. And that's why everybody thinks in the Democratic Party Donald Trump will get beat in Florida in 2020. But Donald Trump is working hard with the Hispanic community. Rick Scott, the former governor, now senator of Florida, has really, I think, reached out and helped out Donald Trump to understand he needs to be there and helping and supporting these communities. And Donald Trump is doing that. And there's one other thing. We're talking about socialism that's dying. Capitalism is thriving in the United States of America because, like we said before, we got the lowest African American unemployment rate, the lowest Hispanic unemployment rate. We got people who keep saying there's a recession. We've been talking about a recession ever since Donald Trump was elected. You would think the Democrats are praying and begging for a recession. They can't stand an economy that's doing well. And they laughed and said when Trump said he had 3% growth. He did have 3% growth from 4 quarters in a row. And now they say, well, he didn't have it from January to December. So that doesn't count in their minds. But we have some hurdles. But, this is one of the things I see with Donald Trump. And I don't know if he plans it out. He knew that American strength was strong. But as America was building its economic pedigree and getting stronger, he went after China. And when he went after China, it hurt the stock markets. Hey, it may have got Republicans beating a midterm. I think the Republicans beat themselves, but it didn't help any when he went after China and tariffs and the way they used that against farmers. But I will say that instead of the Federal Reserve, instead of the Fed trying to lower rates, they were raising rates, and Donald Trump got so mad at them, and it's like he was almost having more power than the Fed when he went after the China and brought on tariffs. It cooled the economy better than the Fed could, and then the Fed was raising rates, and the economy is trying to shift gears and is messing things up. But Donald Trump, through working with the tariffs and China, has cooled the economy enough, and it's delaying any recession. And now the economists say, we'll probably get a recession at the end of 2019 or 2020. But Donald Trump keeps, the more the press hammers Donald Trump, I believe it's evening out and giving this economy time to keep springing forward. And again, you won't hear this anywhere else but right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. What the press wants to do is just tear into Trump. They want the economy to go bad. But what's happening is Trump is keeping the economy more even-keeled and keeping it steady and keeping it growing. And the tax cuts don't run out because they happen every year. And we will see a lengthening and a continuation of this growing economy against all odds. When Hillary Clinton was running, everybody expected her to win, and we were going to be set up for a recession immediately. But guess what happened? The stock market went crazy, going up every month for an entire year for the first time ever in 2017. 2018 was a lousy year. Let me tell you something, though. For 9 weeks in a row after December 24th bottom, which was almost a stock market, bear market, it has to go below 20 points. The Dow had to drop 20 points. Not only 20 points, 20 percentage points. But they dropped like 19 and a half, came almost to dropping 20% to be an official bear market, but it didn't quite make it. And since that time, we've gone up 9 weeks in a row and almost 10 weeks last week, but it just barely missed it again, being 10 weeks in a row. But guess what? Most of the time, when you see 9 weeks in a row of the stock market going up, it's a good year. So let's see. Let's see what happens. I know the Democrats are praying for a recession. They want economic bad news. They can't stand it if things are going good when Donald Trump is in control. But we'll see. And what I'm saying is socialism is dying in South America. Socialism is trying to rise in America, but smart people can look at history and know that socialism never works out. Capitalism, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, it's in our blood in America. It's in our DNA. We are not socialist. And like Donald Trump said, we will never be a socialist country. And thank God for that. And thank God for you, the listeners, because you are helping to keep America strong and keeping America loving freedom and liberty. And that's why you listen to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. Appreciate you listening. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to listen again next week for another edition of Doc Holliday's Rock-Splitting Politics. You can order Ed's new book, Bedrock Truths, by clicking on the book cover right in front of you on the screen, or visit DocHolliday.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.